Hello and welcome to Newswire. I'm Ayza Omar. It's been over 5 months since the BJP-led government of India imposed a complete lockdown on occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The communication blockade, where basic cell phone and landline services have been seized, the internet has been blocked, and the security crackdown that has badly affected schools, colleges, businesses, and turned the lives of 12.5 million people upside down. The government of India has throughout been claiming that everything is back to normal in the besieged valley, but it refuses to let humanitarian organizations or international news networks open access to the area. It stopped even its own opposition party members from entering Jammu and Kashmir, indicating that something there is to be hidden. Now, the latest reports from the Concerned Citizens Group on Kashmir, it etches a very deplorable picture. People there have lost their expectations from Delhi. While Union Home Minister Mr. Amit Shah, he said that most of those 5,000 detained during protests in Jammu and Kashmir have been released. What he forgets to mention here, that they have been released on bonds that guarantee that those released will not publicly criticize the abrogation of Article 370 or any government policy for that matter. And if they violate that bond, not only they will go to jail, but their guarantors, or that is their family, friends and loved ones who have signed the bond for them, they will go to jail as well. Meanwhile, the BJP-led government, it seems, is on a streak of bad decisions. Their latest move to pass a bill into law, the Citizenship Amendment Act of 2019, that provides citizenship status and protection to persecuted non-Muslim minorities from Bangladesh, Afghanistan and Pakistan, has brought thousands of Indians to the streets in protests. But sadly enough, the Supreme Court today has just come out with a decision that while it hears these petitions contesting the CAA, it will not put a stay on this very act. To get a better idea of how Kashmir is faring now and what is unfolding across India with the BJP-led government's very RSS right-wing ideology, let's speak to our guests. We have Mr. Muzzamil Thakur, an analyst, joining us from London, and also Mr. Lieutenant General Naeem Khalid Lodhi, a defense analyst, joining us from Islamabad. Welcome to both of you to the show. General, just as I mentioned, the Supreme Court's decision just came in, and it's disturbing for those who had been hoping that maybe the judiciary could step in and evaluate that the reaction on the streets of India could be evidence that the BJP-led government might finally, be taking a step back. What is your reaction to what has unfolded in the past few days?
Thank you very much. I think as far as the Supreme Court is concerned, it would be suffice to say that they are under pressure. Naturally, there's a large political party with a large mandate, so they have to be careful whatever they say. In my opinion, India has failed in its first phase in Indian-occupied Kashmir, which was to subdue the ongoing movement and to, just take out all the strength from this movement. It was just a job of 15 to 20 days for such large army, but now it's the end of 4th month and still they have not been able to do it. So that speaks a lot as far as the normalcy, as they claim, in that area is concerned. I think the sacrifices of the Kashmiri people is now showing in the form of the mistakes that Indian government is committing, Modi is committing one after another. I'm talking about the CAA, which was, so much has gone against it. We all know it. So what we see is that even the same segments of Indian civil society, they have also risen. And other political parties, they have also risen against all these steps. Mm-hmm. So I see that this cascade of mistakes is probably a result of their first mistake which they committed in Kashmir, and now they are, continuing it one after another. This definitely does not augur well as far as the Indian society is concerned, as far as the Indian government is concerned. Normally one should be happy whenever your enemy is making mistakes, but in this case, because it affects us directly, because the affectees are Muslims, one, and secondly, the instability within a country at times is externalized by the rulers, and they can blame their neighbors. So that way it is quite worrisome for Pakistan, all these things which are going on. But in the end, I see that everything is going towards the independence of Kashmir. They will definitely put away the yoke of Indian atrocity.
So you're thinking it's going in the favor of Jammu and Kashmir. Here, Mr. Thakur, you're Kashmiri. We've been talking a lot on Newswire about the predicament of those who are stuck in this very painful situation. Fourth month has just started. Your family is also there. Tell us a little about how the situation is for your loved ones now. Is the problem of accessibility, communication any better?
From a personal capacity, I can only tell you what I know. I'm still unable to talk to my family. In the last 4 months, I haven't spoken to anybody, not a single person. I've also come to the information that some of my cousins, my relatives, have been lifted in the middle of the night, kidnapped. They've been taken to torture centers. They've been taken to jail. Whether they're in Kashmir or outside of Kashmir, I still don't know that. So even someone like me still has no access. But at the same time, there are people that do have some access. There is limited mobile connectivity. And the internet is still completely banned. I think there was a report recently that came out that India has implemented the longest standing internet blockade in the history, especially from a so-called democratic nation. So in that sense, there are people that have some kind of communication, but it's still limited. It is still against the international laws and human rights laws, the way that India have clamped down on the Kashmiris. But I also want to mention that we are still surviving. We will continue to survive. Only yesterday we had Sayyid Ali Shah Gilani, the leader of the JRL, one of the Joint Resistance Leadership, the head of the Hurriyat Conference. He issued a 10-point agenda for the people of Kashmir and the supporters of Kashmir of how to maintain this struggle, how to maintain this movement against the Indian occupation. And it is apparent, very apparent now, that demographic change is on its way. Indian government and the Indian people are trying to catch up the land, eat up the land, the same way the Israelis have done with the Palestinians, and they will try and emulate that. I also want to mention that this isn't just limited to the people of Kashmir. The BJP is a fascist right-wing government, and it's spilled over into their own mainland India. And you can see that with the recent laws that they've passed, which is extremely similar to the Nuremberg laws that Hitler and the Nazi Germany had imposed upon the Jews back in the 30s. So this is going towards a fascist right-wing government. But when we talk about what can happen next, I want to respond in a way that we can see where this has stemmed from. I think we've also seen Donald Trump, the president of the United States, doing something similar, creating concentration camps for so-called illegal immigrants or those people that that didn't come into the United States legally. This is exactly what's happening in India. But the problem is, if nobody spoke up against this law, against Donald Trump during those times, I don't think anybody in the West is going to counteract the activities and the illegal laws that are being passed by India.
That is a legitimate concern, because when we're talking about human rights violations, and in general, this question is addressed to you because Pakistan is accused by India for politicizing the issue, for having a vendetta, for having an agenda when it comes to highlighting the human rights violations unfolding in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. But in October, a news agency, AFP in fact, they got hold of a police list of detained individuals since August 5th. And what was shocking about this list is that the Indian authorities in occupied Kashmir had detained 144 of these people. From this entire list, 144 of these were minors, including a 9-year-old. So when these kind of sort of revelations come out in the public by credible news agencies, one would wonder that where are all the sort of, pillars of society that like to say that they are standing for liberty, human rights, and democracy? Where's the UN? Where are the world leaders in addressing this, putting attention on this?
Right. In fact, I would like to make one statement as far as, the international conscience is concerned. We keep on talking a lot about it, and we keep on saying in one breath, on one side, that our nation states, they pursue their interests, and immediately then we also ask this question that why the international conscience is asleep and they are not reacting. Actually, in my opinion, we will have to separate the international civil society and the nation states. Whereas the international civil society has reacted positively, and they have raised concerns about what all is happening there through through media, through social media, through their gatherings, through their processions. But yes, the nation states and the UN has not reacted in that fashion. But now you must have heard that China, on the request of Pakistan, has again decided to raise the issue at the United Nations Security Council, and some deliberations are going on. So that way we can be hopeful. But one thing I'm very sure, that as for the attitude of Modi and attitude of Indians are concerned, only two factors will change their attitude. One is how the freedom struggle in the occupied Kashmir continues after these the curfew things are lifted, and how Pakistan stands by them steadfastly to support their cause. So till then we'll have to wait. And as I said, that their first phase is not succeeding, it is failing. So it is just a matter of time that you will find this struggle movement, the movement against, the atrocities will take up, will pick up pace, and Pakistan will be supporting it. That will make the real difference.
Okay, Lieutenant General Naeem Khalid Lodhi there, thank you so much for sharing your insight. Let me welcome another voice here to add to this conversation, Mr. Asif Durrani, the former ambassador, right now joining us from Quetta. Welcome to the show, Mr. Durrani. We were just hearing the General talk about how the international civil society has responded positively, that the issue is still being addressed, it's being kept alive. But what we are seeing unfold in a society, in a community, across a population of 12.5 million, what kind of atrocities that they are facing on a daily basis. And with Prime Minister Imran Khan's visits to the Middle East in the past few days, various countries, do you feel that the sort of support that he had garnered in the beginning, especially leading up to the UN General Assembly summit in New York, he still has that kind of support over what is unfolding in occupied Jammu and Kashmir?
I think we should be cautious when we are saying support. The Prime Minister's address was there. It was quite emotional. But diplomacy is not run on the basis of emotions. So you have to be calculative, and you have to count your strengths and weaknesses. In the diplomatic arena, it is India, which at the moment, because of its economic muscle, is enjoying a honeymoon with the world powers. There is no doubt about it. For Pakistan, the issue is the life and limb of the Kashmiri people struggling for the past 7 decades, especially for the past 3 decades. So this is a struggle, and ultimately I'm of the firm view that rather than world, it would be the Kashmiri people and Pakistan. They'll have to fight it out. Of course, diplomatic, efforts would be there, and that should continue.
And Mr. Durrani, what is now being seen as a discriminatory, highly controversial act, the Citizenship Amendment Act, some analysts are saying that it is a spillover of what we've seen happen in Jammu and Kashmir. It's a sort of it goes along with the right-wing RSS Hindutva-led ideology of the BJP government. Do you think the kind of reaction India is seeing as a result of this could help inadvertently the plight of the Kashmiris?
It is possible. Everything is possible. But if you look at the RSS agenda, it has been very clear, whether it was revoking Article C70 and 35A about occupied Jammu and Kashmir, or about the NRC, National Register of Citizens, which they already had it. And in this case, we should not forget that the Indian Supreme Court, which is headed by Justice Gogoi, who himself belongs to Assam, he had a soft corner about the Bengal, about those immigrants who have been sitting in Assam. So we have to look at different aspects and what action India has taken. Of course, when there's a reign of terror, when there's a majoritarian psyche which is ruling, and they want to suppress the minorities, especially the Muslims. So in my view, this would be the unraveling of India.
This would be
Reason being, if you smash the sense of belonging from the people, then that state cannot stay united.
So this entire, I mean, it is a huge population. It is the largest minority of Muslims in any country at the moment, any non-Muslim country. In India, 14% of them are Muslims right now. And the CAA, along with recently the NRC, and before that the abrogation of Article 370 in Jammu and Kashmir, it has disenfranchised Muslims there. It's highlighted them as not part of this country, not part of their culture. What is Pakistan doing in terms of spreading the awareness or reaching out to the international community to address this? Because the long-term implications for the Muslims in India is going to be really bad.
Well, it's a gigantic task. On Kashmir, we already have a case. But with regard to this CAB and NCR, NRC, these are pretty new developments, of course, derived from the RSS and BJP manifestos agenda. So, yes, they are pushing the Muslims to the wall. But my view is, and I'm a firm believer, having served in India, the kind of sense of belonging which the Muslims had prior to this act, or prior to BJP coming into power, this is going to unravel India.
This is going to unravel India. Mr. Coming to you on this, I mean, this conversation is spilling over beyond what has been going on for over 90 days in Kashmir, but also on what is the overall situation in India now. What's your perception on this, this sort of pushing Muslims against the wall? Do you think that how is this going to move forward?
I think off the bat, I would say that it isn't necessarily Pakistan's responsibility to take the cause of the Indian Muslims to the world stage. It is a very obvious issue, and it is a Muslim issue. And I think the OIC and other Muslim countries should step up in their efforts to safeguard the minorities, particularly the Muslims in India. It shouldn't always be the responsibility of Pakistan. Pakistan already has its hands full, particularly with the case of Kashmir, which is, of course, a legal issue, an international dispute. The issue inside India must be taken up by all the other countries, not necessarily even Muslim countries. It is a human rights issue. I mean, as we mentioned, it is reflecting the days of Nazi Germany under Hitler. So in that situation, I think the international community must step up. The NGOs, the courts of justice, the criminal courts, they must step up and they must implement some kind of rule and law, and even an action team. For God's sake, you have people that are going to be put in concentration camps, detention camps. At this point in time, the international community are slamming and condemning the Myanmar government as well as the Chinese government with their role with the Uyghurs or with the Rohingyas, respectively. So in that sense, this is going to happen exactly once again with the people of India, with the Muslims of India, with the minorities inside India. And I want to mention that in the old days, when the Holocaust happened, people said, never again, we will never allow this. Then the issue of the Rwanda happened. People said, never again. Now we have the Rohingya. Just before that, Srebrenica. What happened in the Balkans? I mean, history is repeating itself, and people are saying that we should wait until the issues subside or see what happens, see what the ultimate output is, and then we'll take a stand. I don't think that is going to be the most prudent way of politics. I think we need to preempt what the opposition, what the enemies, and what human rights violators are going to do, and they're announcing it, particularly with the BJP government and the RSS. They announce their intentions well in advance, so we know exactly what they're planning on doing. It is our responsibility as activists, as media personnel, as diplomats and government officials to expose the human rights violations that are about to happen, and then, of course, try and implement laws or sanctions or some kind of act. It isn't enough to pay lip service. Action must be also taken.
Because it's not just, you said, I mean, it's a wide-ranging effect here. When they detain a 9-year-old boy for rioting, and what is rioting? Throwing stones at the police or the security forces there in occupied Jammu and Kashmir, tearing that child away from his family, from his mother, putting him in a cell. They've essentially changed the very thought process of that child forever. I mean, they've pretty much made an enemy. And this is not just in the past 4 months alone. This has been decades of human rights violations of this. I mean, I was reading this report from the that I mentioned earlier. And there's something very riveting here that's written by a journalist. He's a Kashmiri newspaper editor. He doesn't want to be named, but his words, they really shook me. I will read it out for you. I have never seen such mourning in this society. We have lost the capacity to talk to each other, even though we want to unburden ourselves. The silence here is deafening. The people are befuddled. And then he goes on to explain how everybody there pretty much has the same opinion. It's a fascist government. They have a RSS behind the BJP. I mean, they've all said that. But what again struck out is that they have absolutely no expectation that this will be remedied.
You know, it's unfortunate that even living as citizens, Indians living as citizens inside India, have no hope of their own judicial system. They have no hope in their governance. They have no hope in the international community. And I know this sounds terrible to say, but as a Kashmiri that has suffered for 70 years, we warned the people of India, we warned the minorities that this is going to happen to you. If it can happen to us, it will happen to you. And we are an occupied territory. We are not even Indians in that sense. And there are draconian laws being imposed on us. Imagine what can happen to you. And I think it's interesting what you said in terms of young children that are taken away and their entire mentality is going to be changed. If you want to radicalize the youth, you criminalize them. And that is exactly what India are doing.
And they've been doing it non-stop. And the Kashmir Chamber and Industry, they came out with this report recently where they talked about how the economy of the territory has suffered so badly. They talked about losses to the tune of 179 billion rupees in the past 4 months since the imposition of this lockdown by the Indian government. I mean, what will be the future of those now unemployed, those hundreds of thousands of people without a job, with no financial security, farmers completely distraught with lost crops of apples and other things that they thrived on. I mean, this economy was built on tourism. Their economy was built on apple trade. What is going to be their future?
It's a very bleak future from the looks of it, particularly when we talk about economics. But we also must remember that I want to go back to what Sayyid Ali Shah Gilani Sahib said in his 10-point agenda in terms of supporting one another. I think we have to start working in tandem with each other. Instead of expecting that we are going to do trade with India or we're going to become dependent with India, we need to survive on one another, as we have done for the last 4 months. And I think that's going to be one of the most important keys of survival, not just of the movement, but of ourselves. My biggest concern is going to be that India are going to send so much infrastructure and development and money into Kashmir that they will try and break people's will. Of course, I doubt that will happen. However, at the same time, you also have to remember that, as you mentioned, the people's spending power is declining. The amount of money that they have to go to hospitals, to eat, to send their children to school, for how long are people going to suffer? And I think at some point in time, the international community must intervene.
It must intervene. And this question I put to you, Mr. Durrani, why is it that at least the Muslim countries can't come together? I mean, it's a big ask to expect the international community to join hands and put economic pressure, which they simply and easily can. And it's a matter of minutes before they can decide to impose sanctions until India backs down on what it's doing. So why is it that the OIC can't make a concrete step? And there are 50 plus countries on that. I mean, they could take a huge step to pressurize India.
It's a good question, but the question is OIC actually and does not have that muscles. They don't have that strength, and it's suffering from experiences. So basically, it was made for Al-Quds Sharif, and then other Muslim causes were included. So we have to wait, and we have to fight ourselves, as I said at the outset. So I have not much hopes in OIC, to tell you frankly. Yes.
All right, Mr. Durrani, thank you so much for joining us. In Mr. Muzzamil Thakur, that's unfortunately all the time we have. We have to take a quick short break, but we'll end with a note on what Mr. Thakur just mentioned, Sayyid Ali Gilani's words, that we have to stand together, we have to support each other, and we have to stand against these atrocities as a united front. And one can only hope that that message will stick through to at least some part of the world and help the cause of Kashmiris. And with that, let's take a quick short break. We'll be back with more stories. Welcome back. You're watching Newswire with me, Ayza Omar. In a landmark case, the former President and Army Chief General Pervez Musharraf has been sentenced to death for high treason by a special court here in Pakistan. Now, this is the first time that a Pakistani military ruler has been convicted for his actions while he was in power. So this conviction focuses essentially on Mr. Musharraf declaring an emergency in the country and in turn suspending the constitution. And this is back in 2007. It was right at the tail end of his 9-year tenure after he had seized power in a coup in 1999. Now, the government of Pakistan has just declared on the return of Prime Minister Imran Khan from his Middle East tours that they've decided to defend Pervez Musharraf during the hearing of an appeal that will be filed on his behalf. The government has called the trial unfair. For one of the reasons is that, as Mr. Anwar Mansoor, the Attorney General, says, is because he was tried in absentia. There are a score of reactions coming from all quarters, majority of which are contesting the verdict itself. We'll be talking to our experts to get an idea of how they see it and analyze what the implications, especially the political implications of such a verdict will be in Pakistan. So without further ado, let me introduce who will be joining us. We have Lieutenant General Amjad Shoaib joining us from Islamabad. He's a defense analyst. And we have Barrister Muhammad Ali Saif joining us from Antalya, Turkey. And he's a senator. Thank you so much for taking out the time to speak to us here. I would like to start with you, General Shoaib. This reaction we're getting from all quarters, there are various reactions, but what we hear mostly is that there is a lot of disagreement with how this trial took place and the verdict. And some are saying, from not just political quarters, but also military, that it was done in haste. What's your opinion on it?
See, first of all, we have to note that the army has never objected to the trial. They just wanted a fair trial, and a trial in which everybody is, include all those who have debated, who are there part of the system, particularly the law minister who had formulated or prepared this order for imposition of emergency. Now, this man who was with General Musharraf at that time and made preparations for everything, and when emergency was imposed, he was responsible. When the case was instituted, then he was sitting with Nawaz Sharif, and again he was Nawaz Sharif now law minister. So such were the things where it appeared as if an individual is being targeted, and there are no intentions of punishing others, or there are no intentions of really putting the system right. So that way it created a doubt that it is personal enmity, because it had something to do with Nawaz Sharif also, and similarly Taqa Chaudhry, who was the Chief Justice at that time, and he gave the order that a case under Article 6 should be instituted against Musharraf.
Right.
So these were the doubts earlier. But then subsequently we saw that there was an unholy haste. There were certain things which, there were certain legal points which were raised by comment also. But these were not heard, they were not allowed. The judges, they should have thought that they are awarding death sentence. It's a capital punishment which is being awarded, and that too without being heard, without giving a chance to the accused to give his own side of the story. That was something which definitely was very objectionable. We could see that the Chief Justice was in a haste to push this case, and perhaps it was for his own personal glorification that he was doing this, that he should be able to say that he was the person who punished a chief of the army staff also. But then, will it go well with the rest of the Pakistani or let's say army? Because everybody feels, particularly in the army, there's a feeling that either the institution is being targeted, or if the individuals are being targeted, then the individuals should have been heard. He should have been given an opportunity to explain his position, which has not been given, which has been denied. So there are certain objections and doubts,
right,
which are arisen, and it has become a sort of, I would say, a disputed judgment, a controversial judgment, which is being questioned now.
Okay. So, Senator Saif, let me ask you this then. I mean, he is being tried for holding the constitution abeyance in 2007. I mean, my question essentially is, when that military coup took place in itself back in 1999, 12th October, I mean, that in itself was the suspension of the constitution, or was it not? I mean, what is the difference? Why is he being tried for 2007 and not previous incidents where not just him, but others have been examples of holding the constitution in abeyance, according to Article 6?
Yes, well, insofar as the actions of October 1999 are concerned, the Supreme Court went ahead and gave a detailed judgment in Zafar Ali Shah case in in the year 2000, in which it completely justified the military takeover at that time, and also praised General Musharraf for taking this timely action, which, according to their own judgment, was in the interest of national security, and very pertinent and very appropriate action at that time. Now, later, with the change of political situation, they suddenly realized, the higher judiciary, that probably Musharraf was a threat to national security, and that is why whatever he did on the 3rd of November 2007 became a subject matter of this trial. Now, let us not get into the historical background of it, because history is so tainted with prejudices and biases and actions of opposing forces that one cannot come to a clear and a transparent conclusion. But my understanding is that insofar as this particular trial and the judgment rendered yesterday is concerned, I believe it has violated all the norms of judicial impartiality and transparency. And I would quote it as the classical example of violation of Article 10A of our Constitution, which asks for fair trial. And this was by no means, and can by no means be even what you call it, justified as a fair trial. Number one. Number two, it was trial in absentia, and President Musharraf was not given a proper opportunity to defend his case. Okay, they may say that he wasn't available and he was abroad, but these are all lame excuses and reasons which should not have led to this particular result that we saw yesterday. Right. So I believe it's a biased trial, and if seen or analyzed with the prism of, or with the on the pedestal of fair trial, I mean, it will fail on all counts.
Right. Right. In general, coming to you on this, reasons being absentia, that he was tried in absentia, that in itself is the violation of a fair trial. But also the Article 6 of the Constitution, where it says very clearly that anybody who suspends or holds in abeyance the Constitution itself or conspires to do so, that, that this is what we say is guilty of high treason. But an important second clause adds that any person aiding or abetting or helping out in these acts will also be considered guilty of high treason, the 2A clause. Where are those who were part of this entire gambit then? Why are they not named as part of those convicted along with Musharraf?
Because all these people, they had joined PMLN, and now they were part of the system, and at the same time, because of them, perhaps the government was in place, otherwise perhaps they would have lost their majority. So there were about 72 people who left PMLQ and joined PMLN.
So they flipped sides to save their skin.
I think it is intentional, because they didn't want to lose those number of people. And that is why they did that. But another thing, see, I look at it from another angle. As we compare the two incidents, as you mentioned, the one that was of removal of Nawaz Sharif's government, which Musharraf took, and at that time, the Supreme Court gave all reasons that this is legitimate, this has been done. And now they said that the imposition of emergency is not legitimate. See, actually, when you say that the case of high treason is to be instituted against a person who violates or abrogates the Constitution, then it is obvious that it is all dependent on the circumstances, whether it was necessary for him to save the country or not, to save the system or not. Did they analyze? Did they really they get into the whole thing to really specify or give an interpretation of violation, or let's say the abrogation of Constitution, which warranted the death penalty? And there could have been lesser punishments also. And at the same time, if let's say tomorrow somebody writes a law and they say that is accepted, that violation of constitution will be equated with the murder of a person. So will that be a murder of person, or it will have to be defined in some way so that one should be able to understand how can you say that it is treason?
Right.
If the circumstances warranted.
So what?
For example, the government says that because of the judicial actions, the government machinery had totally stopped functioning. And, there was a pressure on the government from all corners that the entire system is choked. They are not functional because the judiciary is not allowing them to work. So there had to be some kind of extra constitutional measure which was necessary to save the government functioning. Right. So can you call it high treason? So these are the things which have not been analyzed by the court. And at the same time, the Chief of Army Staff carrying the label of high treason or dictators, this is nonsense. This is just not acceptable. See, it goes down to the army, to rank and file of the army. Right. They know that the man has been spilling his own blood for the sake of the country. He has sacrificed everything for the sake of the country. He has fought so many wars. He has been serving the nation in almost every rank. And then suddenly, because you have equated something with the high treason, by some action, and without analyzing, without getting into the circumstances under which it was imposed, you are just come to the conclusion that he's a traitor. Right. So traitor label perhaps army will never be able to swallow. It will be a problem for General Bajwa to satisfy his own rank and file, because nobody considers that Musharraf was a traitor.
Right.
I think the court has to take these things into account.
They have to take these things into account because, Barrister, we've heard from the media wing of the army, and I quote here, that the decision given by the Special Court by General Pervez Musharraf, retired, has been received with a lot of pain and anguish by rank and file of the Pakistan Armed Forces. And the statement goes on to say that an ex-army chief, chairman, joint chief of staff committee and president of Pakistan who has served the country for over 40 years, fought wars for the country, can surely never be a traitor. So, Senator, what are your thoughts on this? What does it mean to you, besides the aspects that the general has highlighted, that they were never taken into consideration?
Well, absolutely. You see, this trial has two dimensions, and it must be analyzed with keeping in view these two dimensions. One is the legal dimension, and the other is political. And I personally believe that the judgment that is before us, or the order issued yesterday, because I heard that we don't have a detailed judgment as yet. I believe it's a completely, entirely political decision.
That's where the confusion lies. That's where the confusion lies, Senator. Why is this a political decision? When this case was first brought up back in 2013 against Musharraf, it was understood that Nawaz Sharif had an agenda. It was a politicized vendetta. He was after Musharraf. He wanted him to pay for what he had done. What is the reason now?
No, exactly the same reason continues. Because Nawaz Sharif brought this trial. They were not prepared. The way they brought this prosecution actually made it very clear that it was just a political vendetta, and nothing against Musharraf was brought on record which could prove his case, or even which could prove the case on prima facie basis that there is enough evidence to prosecute him for violation of Article 6. And remember one thing, I entirely agree with the statement of issued by the ISPR. I believe that it has caused ripples in the armed forces, rank and file, and it is because not seen as a justifiable, legally justifiable decision. It is just a political decision in which some kind of score settling is very obvious.
Right, because what is concerning here, Senator, is that the ISPR goes ahead and says this as well, that the due legal process seems to be ignored here, right? And at the same time, just a few, like literally right before this has unfolded, we've seen some of the most corrupt individuals in the history of Pakistan's political history been set free.
I absolutely would like to say that this exactly proves my point. That this is basically a political act, and I won't call it a judgment, in its pure sense, because neither were the proper legal formalities that are required by the law to be followed were followed. Number one, violated all the norms, all the established principles of criminal jurisprudence is laid down so far by the superior judiciary in Pakistan. Like just for example, trial in absentia. Then the prosecution stance taken by the federal government very recently before Islamabad High Court, in which they wanted to withdraw this case and also wanted to ask the special court to not to render its judgment, and the High Court actually ordered so. So that means that this trial, there have been like a series of mistakes and glaring legal lacunas in the whole process. Number one. Number two. Yes, I also wanted to bring this thing on record that look at the in a comparative analysis, look at the treatment offered to other political opponents of General Musharraf. Those who have looted the country are sitting abroad, they are enjoying their political rights, their social rights, their civil rights, and everything. But General Musharraf is being targeted personally as if he was the epitome of all evil and all the problems that Pakistan is facing today, which is not the case. It is basically from certain quarters who are not happy with the honor and prestige and the dignity that the army enjoys in public, in the eyes of the public. Number one, and number two, it's a score settling basically. Some people wanted probably to settle their scores, and this is what we see now. And it is unfortunate that the courts have taken this view.
Okay, we've completely out of time, but General, I really need to get this answer from you in just 30 seconds. What is the way forward now? What is the probability that Pervez Musharraf will be brought back and the sentence will be carried out?
I think we still have to stick to the legal course of action, and the appeal should be filed, and the appellate court must look into the objections which are being raised publicly, and also they may be raised in the petition also, or the appeal which is being filed. So the judgment, I think, should be overturned, and all those points which we are now mentioning should be taken into account so that the ends of justice are met. General Musharraf, without hearing General Musharraf, no judgment should be acceptable to anyone, and the next court should reject it.
Okay. All right. General Shoaib and Mr. Senator Saif, thank you so much for joining us. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have here on Newswire. We've been discussing the case of Pervez Musharraf, the kind of political implications it will have in Pakistan and how it will move forward. And we will see you again next week with more news and analysis coming from Newswire. Till then, goodbye.